Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we're on Canto 7, Chapter 14, Text 12. Jayad,
Jayad,
Yadarte,
Yadarte,
Svan,
Svan,
Pranan,
Pranan,
Anyad,
Anyad,
Va,
Va,
Pitaram,
Pitaram,
Gurum,
Gurum,
Tasyam,
Tasyam,
Svatvam,
Svatvam,
Striyam,
Striyam,
Jayad,
Jayad,
Yas,
Yas,
Tena,
Tena,
I,
I,
Ajito,
Ajito,
Jitaha,
Jitaha,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Yastena Yajito Jita, Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan, Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum, Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad, Yastena Yajito Jita, Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan, Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum, Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad, Yastena Yajito Jita,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Anyad Va Pitaram Guru,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Jayad Yad Arthe Swan Pranan,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
ladies.
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Yastena Yajito Jita,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Yastena Yajito Jitaha,
Yastena Yajito Jita.
One more.
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Jayad Yadarte Swan Pranan,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Anyad Va Pitaram Gurum,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Tasyam Svatvam Striyam Jayad,
Jayat,
Jayat,
one may give up.
one may give up.
Yat arte,
Yadante,
for whom? Swan,
Swan,
one's own.
one's own.
Pranan,
Pranam,
life.
life.
Anyat,
Anyat,
one may kill.
one may kill.
Va,
Va,
or.
or.
Pitaram,
Pitaram,
the father.
the Father.
Gurum,
Guru,
the teacher or spiritual master.
the teacher of spiritual master.
Tasyam,
Tasyam,
unto her.
unto her.
Svatvam,
Sattvam,
ownership.
ownership.
Striyam,
Striyam,
unto the wife.
unto the wife.
Jayat,
Jayat,
one must give up.
one must give up.
Ya,
Ya,
one who.
one who.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead.
The Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Tena,
Tena,
by him.
by him.
He,
He,
indeed.
indeed.
Ajitaha,
Ajitaha,
cannot be conquered.
cannot be conquered.
Jitaha,
Jitaha,
conquered.
conquered.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. One so seriously considers one's wife to be his own that he sometimes kills himself for her, or he kills others, including even his parents or his spiritual master or teacher. Therefore, if one can give up his attachment to such a wife, he conquers the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never conquered by anyone. Please repeat. One so seriously considers one's wife
One so seriously considers one's wife
to be his own
to be his own,
that he sometimes kills himself
that he sometimes kills himself
for her,
for her,
or he kills others,
or he kills others,
including even his parents,
including even his parents,
or his spiritual master or teacher.
or his spiritual master or teacher.
Therefore, if one can give up his attachment to such a wife,
Therefore, if one can give up his attachment to such a wife,
he conquers the Supreme Personality of Godhead,
he conquers the Supreme Personality of
who
God,
is never conquered by anyone.
who is never conquered by anyone.
Purport. Every husband is too much attached to his wife. Therefore, to give up one's connection with his wife is extremely difficult. But if one can somehow or another give it up for the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the Lord Himself, although not able to be conquered by anyone, comes very much under the control of the devotees, of the devotee. And if the Lord is pleased with the devotee, what is there that is unobtainable? Why should one not give up his affection for his wife and children to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Where is the loss of anything material? Household life means attachment for one's wife, whereas sannyas means detachment from one's wife and attachment to Krishna. One so seriously considers one's wife to be his own that he sometimes kills himself for her or kills others, including his parents or his spiritual master or teacher. Therefore, if one can give up his attachment to such a wife, he conquers the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never conquered by anyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Okay, I'm not sure how long I'm going to be able to talk this morning. I got the shakes a little bad. This is the denouement of the explanation of ideal family life, that you give it up. That's ideal. Yeah, the family life that we experience in the material world, of course, is temporary anyway, and whether you voluntarily give it up or not, you're going to give it up by the force of time. So this is pragmatic. Sometimes a materialist will read a verse like this and think that the Vedic civilization is against families. We hear that accusation sometimes against women, against families, etc. But actually, the Vedic civilization is for truth. And rather than living one's life in illusion, thinking that this world is real, that the bonds that we form with other living beings are real, are very important to us, even more important than one's own life, practically speaking. That kind of illusion has to be dealt with. Vedic civilization means how to make human life successful. And that means coming to the realization that we're not these bodies, at least that much. If we can understand we're not the body, then all the bonds that we form in connection with this body, they're not as tightly bound up. They don't bind us as tightly. If you have knowledge, then even though you may go through the external requirements of material life, but within you should be thinking always that I'm not this body, I'm a spirit soul, I'm a part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit Soul, Krishna, and that's my real relationship. Then the relationships that we have with others take on a far different hue. In ordinary material life, relationship with a man or a woman is everything. I have an old friend of mine. He was a childhood school friend, actually, one of the people that I left England with and went to Australia. I became a devotee, he didn't. He lives back in our hometown. I go and see him whenever I'm in England, just to give him some connection. And he was married for 38 years. Then suddenly his wife got cancer, and within 2 months she was gone, finished. So it was a big shock. He'd been living in this nice bubble of household life for 38 years, and now, pop, it was gone. Time had overtaken them and their relationship. She was gone, he was still here. And he became so depressed, he became suicidal. He didn't know what to do, he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. He was so distressed. Then finally, after a few months, he met an old girlfriend that he hadn't seen for so many years. And they hit it off, and now, they're living together and he's happy again. So what kind of happiness? He doesn't realize that all the pain and suffering that he had to go through from the breaking of the first relationship will again come with the second relationship, and so on and so on. But because he has no information about any alternative, he must form another bond with some other living being. Nobody can live in isolation, it's not possible. There's an example that I often use about a priest, a Christian priest. He was captured in some third world country, there was a coup, so they put him in prison. And they put him in a tiny prison cell, 8 feet by 6 feet. And that became his home for 8 years. And they left him there in complete isolation, except of course they were feeding him. But apart from that, he was in solitary confinement. After 8 years there was a change in government, and then they released him. So when he came out, he was still sane. And they were surprised. After 8 years solitary confinement, how is it that you're still sane? Everybody else, after 1 or 2 years, they all go mad. Due to deprivation of relationship, no connection with other living, no meaningful connection with any other living being. So they couldn't figure out, how is it this priest is still normal, he's happy. So he explained that my relationship with God is my best friend. So I've entrusted my whole life to him and his work. So I accept immediately whatever situation that I'm in as being the mercy of the Supreme Lord. He's my best friend. It's always for my benefit. So in that way, when I was put into this cell, I felt, all right, this is the space that God has given me now to live in. So I immediately made my adjustments, and I was quite happy. So this is God consciousness, because he may not have what we would call, real God consciousness, but even a glimmer of it gives you some relief. It's a known fact that in the United States they have several thousand prisoners in the prisons, all in solitary confinement, and some of them have been in that condition for 15 to 20 years. All of them have severe psychological problems. So we can't live without relationship. That's not possible. As living beings, we're thinking, feeling and willing. And we have to do that with others, not just on our own. It's very difficult to be on your own for very long. I just read a report about, there's one room in America where it's so encased in steel and concrete and everything else that that room, there's nothing that can penetrate it. Yeah, there's no sound, there's no light, there's no nothing. And they put people in that room as an experiment to see how long they last in total sensory deprivation. And most of them don't last more than about 10 to 12 minutes. And we're not talking about hours or days even. 10 to 12 minutes, and it's so dense, so isolated, that they actually start cracking up. They start hallucinating and all kinds of other things. So the living condition means exchange of consciousness. It means engagement of consciousness with another living being, not with dead things, but with live things. Yeah, if we, take as another example, if somebody buys this is a guy thing, if somebody buys a Lamborghini, let's say, so he's very happy with his motor car, and then you tell him, all right, you can have this Lamborghini, but you have to keep it in the garage, and only you can be with it, nobody else at any other time. You go and enjoy your car. So you put him in the room with the car, how long is he going to last? A few minutes, admiring the tires or the hubs or the engine or the steering wheel or the latest gadgets and what have you. But after a little while, what is he going to do with it? He can't. There's no reciprocation from a dead object. He's putting his consciousness into the object, but he's not getting anything in return. And unless he can actually take it out and invite his friends, now you come and drive with me, let's enjoy. Then that's enjoyment when he's with another living being, otherwise not. So the real important thing is relationship. The relationships that we have with other living beings. But if we mistake the identity of those living beings to be these dead bodies, then we're going to be frustrated. We're not going to get the happiness that we seek, the exchange that we seek, because it will end at a certain point in time. That's inevitable. That's the whole material world is under the force of time. So nobody can conquer time, because that's the impersonal energy of the Supreme. It's the supreme regulating factor in the material world. And all living beings have been moved by the force of time. And by that force of time, we come into contact with a certain set of living beings. And then after with the same force of time, we lose that contact again. Therefore, Prabhupada sometimes used that example of the bits of straw that are floating in the ocean. So the movement of the waves sometimes throw the bits of straw together. And then again, the same movement of waves separates them and they never come in contact again. Or similarly, if we're traveling on a train, we may strike up a conversation with somebody on the train. We get very friendly, we talk this way and that way. The train comes to its destination, they go off in their way, you go off in your way. You never see them again. So what kind of relationship? What we really require is a permanent relationship, which we can always have that constant engagement of the senses, thinking, feeling and willing, our consciousness. It has to be constantly stimulated. We don't like limitation. We don't like restriction. So in the material world, everything is limited and everything is restricted. And no matter what we do to try to enjoy, and that means through relationships, it's not going to be successful. So the whole Varnashram system is based on this understanding that this material life is temporary, this human form of life is temporary, but it has a special purpose. That from this platform we can come to a platform of permanence. We're living in an impermanent place, but with this human form we can realize the permanence of our real identity as spirit soul, and the identity of others as spirit soul. And then we can connect together, work together, bond together, but for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, who it is that we have our real relationship with. Actually, we don't have any relationship with anyone except Krishna. Krishna is everything. Krishna is everywhere. He's in the heart of every living being. When we attempt to have a relationship with another living being, that living being is dependent on their relationship to Krishna. Our life is dependent on our relationship to Krishna, and therefore the central point is doing everything together, individually or collectively, for the pleasure of Krishna. That relationship is real. It's not illusory. It's not an imagination. It's not a fairy tale, but it's actually the real truth. So we don't want to live in this illusion of thinking that this material world is all there is. That's a very miserable condition of life. It's not very optimistic. But people become so crazy by this ignorance of identifying with the body, they're prepared to do anything and everything to gratify it. Just like a person when he knows that his time's running out. Nowadays they call a bucket list. You know what a bucket list is. When somebody tells you now you're going to die. You have 6 months left. All right, what are all the things that I want to do before I die? So they write their bucket list. I'll go and climb Mount Everest. Somebody, I read one the other day, some young girl, what a bucket list was, to kiss somebody in the rain. That's a dying wish. What is the use of such ideas? Where is the benefit? You come into this human form, it's so valuable, it's got so much potential, but because you don't have any information, you don't have any understanding of the true meaning of life, what life actually is, so you waste it, that's all. You waste whatever time you've got doing silly things, which after a flash, one flash of moment, is over and done with. Where is the enjoyment that we previously had, from our material activities? It's like watching a movie. When you're watching the movie, you get so absorbed in it, you actually experience emotions, based on what you're seeing in the movie, so it becomes like a real thing to you. But after the movie's over, what are you left with? The movie itself is not real. It's just, a bunch of flashing lights on a screen, which we construct in a certain way in our minds to be meaningful, that's all. But actually, what is it? It's just flashing lights. And even the objects that have been filmed, then being projected on the screen, they're also not real. So when we think back, different periods of our life, it's just the same as thinking back and, you've seen a movie at some point, later on you think about that movie. So the memories that we have of so-called real life are nothing more than, the same as remembering a movie that we saw. They're no more real to us, they have no more real effect on us than a movie does. But we think, this is life, this is important, this is what I should spend all my time on. So we become absorbed in material life, and we're driven. We're driven by desire to be happy. Nobody is happy, and therefore we're always looking for it. And we'll do anything and everything to try to fulfill our, material desires. These very powerful urges that we have, for pleasure. People will do anything, as is mentioned here. It's not an exaggeration to say that somebody in love or lust, rather, is quite prepared to, kill another living being to satisfy their own senses. And it doesn't matter whether it might be their mother, their father, their guru, or anything else. If something's an obstacle to my enjoyment in the material world, get rid of it. This is the mentality. So in that way, the material life is always fraught. It's full of uncertainty, it's full of unhappiness, and the denouement is not very nice. You die. I saw a series actually called The Human Body, which was made by the BBC some years ago. It's worth watching. I recommend it to devotees because you really start to see the body as a machine there. And they trace the creation of the body from the time of sexual intercourse, film the sperm going into the egg and fertilizing it, and then they film all the different stages of the development of the eggs up to the point of birth, and then they followed the life, of this baby. And anyway, so they're filming like the progress of human life from conception to death. And for the death part of it, they actually filmed a guy dying. And this man was an atheist. So, the whole film is propaganda for atheism, evolution, the body is everything. So this man, at the end of his life, what has he got? He's got some kind of cancer, he's dying, nobody can do anything to help him. And he's resigned to just disappearing and becoming nothing. They give him so many drugs, he's in so much pain. They give him so many drugs that he's not aware of anything. Yeah, he can't communicate anymore, he's just like a vegetable on the couch. And then he dies. And that's it, really, wonderful, uplifting, end to the story. Dies in ignorance, doped up to his eyebrows, not aware of anything around him. And then what do? They just burn the body and scatter the ashes in the garden, as if that's going to help him, grow up with the flowers or something. So the point is that the body is not everything. This is the mistake that material civilization makes, that we're educated right from the beginning. And the whole structure of society supports this idea that we are the body and that's all there is. And that your only business in life is to go out and gratify your senses as much as possible. And that ultimately it's okay to do whatever you need to do to get that gratification, even if you have to kill and slaughter other living beings, which they're doing. They rationalized, the killing of so many animals and birds and fishes, and that recently they rationalized the killing of babies within the womb before they even get a chance to get born. They just butcher them. What to speak about your own mother and father? Killing their own children within the womb. Why? Because we can't afford it. We want the sex, but we don't want the result. So this way people become mad. They start to think that they can do anything and everything, that there's no Supreme Lord in control. There are no laws of material nature which will bring to us, the inevitable result of our own actions. But rather you're just free to do anything you like, and as long as it makes you happy, it's bona fide. So they're always changing the laws to increase this idea of sense gratification. And in this way people miss the real benefit of this human form. The real value is gone. Somebody asked me one time a question in the class I gave in Detroit, that what is there of real value? So, we know as devotees, the real value is the sense of our relationship with the Supreme Lord, because that lasts. Anything that's valuable means it can't be taken away from you. If we have something that we think is of value, but we know it can be taken away, then where's the value? When that time comes, you've lost it, you don't get it back, then the value is gone. So something of real value is something which is based on the sense of ourselves as being eternal living beings, and eternal parts and parcels of a supreme living being, and entering into, that bond with that supreme living being. That will not let us down. Krishna will never let us down, but he'll always support us and sustain our relationship, and that's expressed here, that who is never conquered by anyone becomes conquered by one who gives up the bodily concept of life. That's what is attracting Krishna, that this person is coming back to reality. He's giving up the bodily concept of life, and he's trying to detach himself from that so that he can attach himself to me. So then Krishna becomes very much obliged to such a personality and gives them all the means by which they can come to him. That's his promise in the Bhagavad Gita. So in that way then, the Varnashram system is based with this, worldview, spiritual worldview, rather than a mechanistic worldview. Everything that you do is based on, everything that we do is based on our perception of what we are and what this world is. Yeah, it's reciprocal to the information that we receive about it. So if we want to make real progress in human life, we have to understand what we really are. And then our actions will automatically follow suit. Yeah, Gyan and Vigyan. Gyan means knowledge, Vigyan means realized. So Vedic civilization, right from the very beginning, teaches everybody you're not this body. This is the whole basis of it. Then you have the ashrams, you have the varnas, everything is directed towards elevating a person, not immediately, but gradually, to the platform where they have no more identification with material nature at all. And that especially is true for the householders. Because in the position of a householder, that's where you're forming very intimate bonds, strong, sense of relationship with so many other living beings. You're building your dynasty. A man and woman get married, they have kids. Those kids grow up, they have kids. Those kids grow up, they have kids. And you're in a massive entanglement. Yeah, we all know. It's a big entanglement. It's just increasing and increasing. Therefore, the Vedic word or Sanskrit word for woman is stri, because it means that by combination with a woman, a man then expands everything that is, its connections with the material world just expand and expand and expand on the basis of this development of family life. So that cannot be avoided. Relationships are a must, and Prabhupada says 99% of all the human beings will have to get married, or should be married. So it's not an easy thing to do, to get free of that. But this is a systematized way of doing it. That you go through all these different stages of human life, through the varnas, the ashramas, but with the idea that ultimately you're coming to this point of giving it all up. Yeah. So you live it in such a way that you don't get too entangled. Yeah. Because we can't do it in the extreme way. Just like Prabhupada mentions the story about the sage that was living on the beach, and he was very hairy sage, and he'd been there a long time, so somebody advised him, why don't you build a cottage? And this man, he had a benediction that he would live one day of Brahma, I think it was, something like that, for every hair on his body. And he was a very hairy sage. So he was going to live a long time, let's say. But when he was asked, why don't you build yourself a cottage? Oh, why should I bother? I'm just here temporarily. So that mentality we have to have. That we can work within the world, we work within our families, we have duties to perform. These all things should be taken very seriously. But with the intention that those that we're connected with will become aware of their spiritual nature, and that our own sense of being spiritual will also increase. It's like dealing with a fire. You can get hot or you can get burnt. So you have to deal with the material energy very, very carefully. Therefore, there's so many strictures, there's so much dharma, so much emphasis on right action. Because that right action is meant to come to the point of detachment. That's the whole point. Even in the householder community, the whole point is detachment. Not callousness, not that we deliberately ignore the needs of others. That you have to do, that's duty. But at the same time, within oneself, one should be thinking of one's true spiritual nature. Then when the opportunity comes, that can be dissolved, that material bondage can be dissolved, and then we can fully dedicate our lives to developing our Krishna consciousness. So it's not an easy thing. Even a personality like Srila Prabhupada, material situation. Not that Prabhupada was ever material, but apparently, his family situation, very, very difficult to give up. Prabhupada was so determined to preach, and his family was so determined not to let him. As long as he did it, and still keep supporting them. And Prabhupada told me there was one time in 1956, he was in Chandni Chowk in Delhi, he stopped to pet a calf. and the mother cow, she saw him and thought, took him as an aggressor, so he was actually charged. He was gored by the cow. I don't know how serious it was, but it knocked him flat on his back. And Prabhupada told me, he said, when the cow hit me, he said, the first thing I thought of was am I now being punished for leaving my family? It just more or less officially become Vanaprastha a couple of years before. But that was his first reaction, that I'm being punished for leaving my family. And then he said, but then I immediately thought about the 6 Goswamis and how they gave up everything for preaching Lord Chaitanya's message. He said, oh, then I was all right. So I had to, but that was his immediate reaction. And he told me that, this affection between husband and wife is so powerful, so strong. He said, I sometimes think about my wife. So what to speak about us ordinary mortals. So Prabhupada, he had practical experience of what it means to be married. He could show us, proper standard for that. But also, it's all based on this idea of ultimate detachment. It must come to that. Otherwise you're doomed to be in the material world again and again and again, repeat the same kinds of behaviors, and suffer the same results. I think Einstein said that madness is repeating the same thing again and again, but expecting a different result. That's one of the symptoms. So we're doing that, chewing the tube, that's called, in Bhagavatam, chewing the tube. Everybody's doing the same things repeatedly, getting the same result, and nobody learns their lesson. So at least in Vedic civilization, it's supposed to be based on intelligence, good discrimination. Prabhupada says that the standard of intelligence is the ability to discriminate between spirit and matter. That's what it means to be intelligent. So any intelligent society, they must figure out the solutions to the problems in life. We have so many problems, how to solve them. If you can't solve them, then how you can say you're intelligent? Real intelligence means you actually solve your problems. So there's no question of a material civilization being in any way intelligent. From Prabhupada's point of view, every darkest regions of ignorance, because they so strongly identify with the body as being the only reality when it's changing right before their very eyes. But they don't want to see it. Just like my friend. He's known me for a long time. He knows I'm a devotee. He knows we have a solid philosophy. When his wife died, he could have contacted me, how do I deal with this? I would have flown all the way to England to help him, if necessary, and preach to him. But he didn't. He'd rather stay in his pit of, ignorance and suffering. And then, when he does pop his head up, what does he do? He gets himself back in the same situation all over again. And if I try and tell him, why are you repeating the same thing? You're going to suffer again. He'll get angry. No. This is life. This bag of stool and blood that I've become attached to. And my own bag of stool and blood, and the bag of stool and blood that's my wife or, children or whatever. No, this is it. This is all there is. Okay, then you have to suffer. What can be done? The material Vedic civilization is not meant for suffering, it's meant for curing the problems of life. That's based on real intelligence, how you should act in such a way that by the end of this lifetime, you've been through it all, you've given up all your attachments, false attachments and illusions, and you're fixed in your eternal relationship with the Supreme Lord. Then you have real happiness. So this is the further stage, after hearing about the duties of householders. Then, now the Bhagavatam's telling us that the next thing is that whatever you've been doing, it's all temporary and you should be prepared to give it up. That's all. Just walk away from it all if you can. So that needs training, it needs help. It needs the whole society to be supportive of that common goal. In Vedic civilization, everybody had the same worldview. Just like nowadays, there's so much propaganda for this mechanistic worldview. People just absorb it automatically. They don't even question it, they don't think about it. Vedic civilization was similar, except that it was based on spiritual life. everybody, every sector of society in Vedic Varnashram system was headed towards the same goal. They had the same understandings, and according to the capacity they would act. So the Brahmanas especially, it says here, household life means attachment for one's wife, whereas sannyas means detachment from one's wife and attachment to Krishna. So sannyas generally is given to the Brahmins. They have sufficient intelligence, clarity of consciousness, that they can actually renounce all the material ties and walk away from them and not look back. So that's particularly meant for the Brahmins. The Kshatriyas, they were only advised to become Vanaprastha. Then the Vaishyas, mixture. They could either remain married or they could maybe sometimes become Vanaprastha. And the Shudras, no question of anything, you stay where you are. That's also Vedic civilization, that the Shudras don't renounce anything because they're not intelligent enough to do so. If you artificially renounce something, then, if you don't have the intelligence to support your actions properly, then after some time all those feelings and desires will come flooding back, and then it will cause a huge disturbance. So the Sudras, they're never advised to give up the family life. They stay where they are, but they continue serving the more intelligent sectors of society. The Vaishyas, because they're in a mixture of ignorance and passion, and some of them may come up to this Vanaprastha stage, but generally speaking, no. But their advice, all right, purify yourself by whatever you've earned, all the material gain that you have, give it all away. Give it for the purpose of preaching Krishna consciousness. That will also be a level of detachment. Instead of becoming bound up by your material gains, recognize them for what they are, and then use them for some permanent purpose, for preaching Krishna consciousness. The Kshatriyas, of course, very difficult for them also to become sannyasi. These are personalities that have been absorbed their whole lives in the politics and sociology and all the rest of it, of human society. So again, it's very easy to lose sight of the goal, and especially when you have a chance to get power. That's the other great, allurement in material world, power. If you have a lot of power, then you can control and manipulate and increase your enjoyment. So the Kshatriyas are always dealing with this kinds of thing. But they're also a little intelligent, and they listen to the Brahmanas. So their advice, all right, just Vanaprastha. But the sannyas business, this is mainly for the Brahmanas. One who has actually fully realized that I'm not this body, I'm the spirit soul. Then they can easily walk away. Or not easily, it's not that easy. Even if we can walk away, the tendrils of attachment to material things and persons is very, very powerful. And they keep trying to, it's like an octopus. You're trying to get away and it's grabbing you from all directions. Even Srila Prabhupada, again, another, the best example. When he went back to India in 1970 to begin ISKCON's preaching there at the end of August, it was a sensation. There was press coverage when he arrived at the airport. There was a group of devotees from the Gaudiya Math came to greet him. And Prabhupada was suddenly all over the newspapers and in all the TV and everything, all over India. That this Indian guru has now made so many foreigners as his disciples. So they were having all these big pandal programs, 20, 30,000 people a night were coming in Bombay, later on in Calcutta. What was one of the first things that happened to Prabhupada when he came back to India to start his official preaching of ISKCON? His family sent him a solicitor's letter, a lawyer's letter, basically telling him that actually you've abandoned the family, they're living in a very miserable condition, they're out on the street practically, due to your irreligiosity. You don't know what real religion is. Real religion means that you look after the family and blah, 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 and you've abandoned us like this in the most cruel and heartless way. How can you say you're a spiritual person? And so if you don't give us 3 lakhs of rupees, then we can make some very bad publicity about you. So it was a blackmail letter, basically. I know it was, actually the whole thing, I've read it, it was written by M.M. Day, Prabhupada's oldest active son, Mathura Mohan Day. And he always resented the fact that Prabhupada had taken sannyas. Because when you take sannyas in India, it means something. Legally, you're dead. And there's no connection with the family anymore, at least legally. And so, Mathura Mohan, being the eldest son, he was the middle child. The oldest child was Sulakshmana, the girl. Then there was Prayagraj, but he was crazy. He died early, actually, about the age of 30 on the streets of Calcutta because he went crazy. Then after that there was Mathura Mohan. Mathura Mohan is the one that Prabhupada writes about or mentions sometimes. He took him to Radhakund to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He said he was a beautiful child, very intelligent, always asking, Prabhupada uses the example of putting his finger in the fan and so many other things, and he was always asking, why is this, why is that, what's this for? And when they were in Radhakund, the sannyasis there, they kind of, took him as a pet boy. So he would go in to see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and they would tell him, now go to Guru Maharaj, offer your dandabats, hold his feet, and beg for his mercy. He was about 4 or 5 at that time. So he went in and he grabbed hold of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's feet. Please, Guru Maharaj, give me your mercy. So he was a nice boy. But later on he got spoiled in his youth. Later in his late youth, he got involved with the communists a little bit. I heard something to do with the Naxalites. They were the people that were going around blowing everything up. So I don't know whether he was involved in that, but he became a bit radicalized. And Prabhupada said that his mother spoiled him. That was the problem. So when Prabhupada took sannyas, he was the eldest responsible son in the family, and that meant that the responsibility for the rest of the family came to him. That's the Indian system. Still even now it's like that. And he resented it. He was an intelligent guy, but he didn't like working either. And now he felt the burden that my father's just suddenly cut himself off. And we're left high and dry, and I'm the one that's got to look after them. So he always had that kind of resentment. And Prabhupada told me that when he took sannyas, he was living, half-time at least in Delhi, and sometime in Vrindavan, Radha Damodar, and that Chippiwada area in Delhi. So he said once or twice, he said the family sent the youngest son, Vrindavan Chandra Day, to come and live with me, even after I took sannyas. So I told him, all right, you can come as long as you live like a brahmachari. He said, so like this way, once, twice they were sending him, and I would say, no you don't, you go back. So the idea there was that the family couldn't accept that he'd taken sannyas. They still wanted to keep, these tendrils of attachment, family, this family consciousness that you're still the father, you're still the head, these are still your children. You're not going to get away with it just, declaring yourself as a sannyasi and walking away from everything. So, sending Vrindavan Chandra Day to live with Prabhupada after he took sannyas meant that was one less mouth to feed at home. All right, let him go, all right, he's taken sannyas, but he's still your father, you still got it in, and he has to pay. But Prabhupada wasn't having anything to do with it, so he would send him back again. So it's not an easy thing to take sannyas, even if you're qualified individually, but there's so many other factors that come in, to try to spoil it, and especially in Kali Yuga. But Prabhupada, of course, was very, advanced and very much aware of his relationship with his Guru and Krishna. And so despite all of these struggles with the family, he was able to actually successfully cut himself off. But even then, he did at one point buy a small flat for them in Calcutta, where they're still living, just so that they would be settled, not destitute, and also because then there couldn't be any criticism, as a leader of the Hare Krishna movement, that is neglecting his former family. Anyway, so that's a few things about detachment. That's our whole goal in life, to become detached by our attachment for something superior. That means giving up our material limited relationships, but not so that we can just become one or void, or because that doesn't work either. Yeah, you realize, all right, your attachments in material life are causing so many problems, so you want to give it up. But if you don't have a positive alternative, then what will you do? You go and live in a cave in the Himalayas for some time, or advertise yourself as some kind of yogi. But the end result is that you come back down again to the material platform and engage in altruism or humanitarianism or whatever it is, because you cannot give up the need for relationship. That's the core of everybody's being, yeah, is that we're all related. So we can't give that up. So if we give up our material relationships, but we don't form bonds on the spiritual platform, then it will also fail. Real detachment means attachment to Krishna. And that we're getting automatically in ISKCON. So in that sense, the ISKCON society is already devised based on, the idea of Varnashram. In Varnashram, every member, whatever their status, are all headed for that ultimate goal, of spiritual emancipation. Dharma, Karma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Everybody's headed for that moksha. So in our ISKCON society, although we may not have, yet very distinguishable castes or varnas, we've got some ashrams, but the varnas are not that clear at the moment. But even though we don't have that, the overall framework is the same as the varnashram system, that we're headed to detachment. Whether we're brahmacharis, grihastas, vanaprasthas or sannyasis, the goal is the same. And especially in the household community, we have to keep that before us, that, this is an interim arrangement that we're in right now, but ultimately we want to come to a point where we're detached. And our ISKCON society is, working on that basis for all the members of the society. We're all going towards this one point of complete detachment from material life and going back home, back to Godhead. So in that sense, we do have a Varnashram society or system. It's not well developed, but the fundamental principle on which it stands is there. And that's this renunciation, detachment from material life. Okay, it's getting late. Sorry, I've gone on a little bit. We'll finish at that point. You have a question, Prabhu?
Yeah, you mentioned your dear friend. I find myself in a similar situation, and I took it up with my spiritual master, and he said, you can invite him to take Prasadam to Govindas. The only way sometimes I associate with him is because I joined with his help, but he didn't. So I kind of owe him. But is there any question of friendship, or why do you... Because sometimes I feel like giving up altogether.
You can only be friends with an equal. You show mercy to those who are less advanced. You serve those who are more advanced. And you have friendship with those who are on the same level. So, like with my friend, I've known him since I was 5 years old. We went through all the stages of school together. We emigrated from England to Australia together. Then we parted company. So I've kept up the ties. Why? Because I'm practicing devotional service, at least to some degree. And I want him to always be conscious of that. He has some respect, at least, for the fact that I became a devotee. He knows that I did it very seriously. It wasn't a whimsical thing, because he was with me when I was going through all the transformations that were necessary for me to come to the point where I could join. So he has respect. So I just, I think that somehow or another, Krishna's put us in touch with each other, in this great ocean of material existence. These two straws have come together for some time. So let me give that man some benefit. Why should my relationship with him not be productive? Let it be productive. If the relationship's there, all right, no problem. Give him Krishna prasadam, and that's the way that I engage him. When I go and see him, I just take him heaps of prasadam. He loves prasadam. That's what's going to save him. Otherwise, he's completely attached to meat eating and all these intoxication and all these things. So, and when I go and talk with him, he never ever asks me, what are you doing now, where have you been, what your activities are. Because they can't relate, karmis can't relate to anything the devotees are doing. So, my family members, they never ask me, what are you doing? Never ever. They tell me everything that's happening with the family, but they never ask me, what are you doing? So I just say, yeah, Hare Krishna. So at least, whenever I contact them, I put Hare Krishna. So they have to read the holy name. Yeah. When I ring up my mum's nice. She's 93 now. I'm going to see her next week. She's nice. When I ring her up, I say Hare Krishna. Oh, Hare Krishna. Yeah, and she's even chanted the whole Maha Mantra on the phone sometimes. So, she's got a little bit of piety there. But the rest of my family members, if I say Hare Krishna, hi. How are you? I'm lucky if they ask me how I am. I mean, they're not inimical, but they just don't get it. So, it's a question of showing a little bit of mercy. Somehow or another, we've come in contact with various people. They're not all spiritualists, but they can become so. That's the point. So why should our relationship with them be wasted? Let's do the maximum that we can to help them gradually, this lifetime, next lifetime, 3 or 4 lifetimes. But that little bit of spiritual contact that they've had, that will increase. And then eventually they'll come to a point where they'll also become devotees. So that, at least that's my mood for it anyway. Any other questions or comments?
Considering that we all have an internal relationship with Krishna, it seems to be logical then that at least those living entities who are in the same mood and have same taste, that they actually also have an internal relationship with each other.
Well, Prabhupada did say that we'll have another ISKCON in the spiritual world. Yeah, we're interacting with other living beings, but on the common platform of pleasing Krishna. So yeah, why should we assume that those relationships will be broken? But we won't be in these bodies. We'll be in some other form. We may not recognize, but it's just like, even by karmic action, we get entangled. So we do things, then we're in the debt of another living being. We die or they die, so how you pay the debt? Your next lifetime you take a birth in such a way that you again meet, and then you have to pay the debt. So there's an entanglement that's going on. So if that's true that it's going on materially from lifetime to lifetime, why not spiritually? Except with us, our next lifetime, hopefully, will be eternal. And the relationships that we have. Now, we may not remember, I met this person in my last lifetime and this was the exchange. But automatically, by the force of nature, you meet that person again, they owe you or you owe them. So there's some instinct that comes, that's from the super soul and the demigods, that now you have to do this or now you have to do that because, there's this hidden debt from previous lives. So you may not be aware of the, original cause, but you feel a compulsion to be engaged with that person in this lifetime. And we're always meeting new people, so-called new people, but they're not necessarily all new. Some of them are, we've got some business, unfinished business with them. So that's what keeps us entangled in the material world. Lifetime after lifetime it's going on. Krishna consciousness severs those material bonds, but establishes real spiritual bonds. Those bonds are going to go on. The association of devotees is all that we care about. That will go on beyond this body. So why not the same devotees that we've served with in this lifetime? but we may not recognize them, you know, in the particular form, but we'll get that connection again, that's for sure. Okay, we'll finish there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
His Grace Hari Sauri Prabhu ki jai.